So I guess we'll get started. Shweta, if you can help me out, if anybody else joins, if you can please let them in. Just take control of the lobby. And if you can confirm, are you able to hear me okay right now and see me and see the presentation also?
Yes, sir. Everything is visible, loud and clear.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank everybody who's joined. I appreciate the time that you've taken to attend this webinar. This is the second time we are doing this. First time we did this for wireless, and now we're doing it for zero trust security. I mean, I guess good form requires that I let you know that the meeting is being recorded. The intention will be that we will upload the recording on YouTube for anybody who could not attend. Anybody who's registered and could not attend, we will send them the link for the recording as well as whatever collateral I'm presenting right now on the screen. So with that, I'll get started. Hi, everybody. The objective of this presentation is to talk about zero trust security. The concept of zero trust has been there for a very long time, right? And unfortunately, the concept has now ended up becoming more of a cybersecurity catchphrase, with the number of attacks having increased, like phishing attacks, ransomware, and business email compromise being at an all-time high. And I think it's the word zero trust has caught a lot of attention because I think May 2021 is when the US government, under the Biden administration, launched an executive order saying that all federal government offices have to implement zero trust architecture, right? So that's when suddenly everybody started talking about zero trust, right? The challenge is that I think the crucial obstacle in the adoption of zero trust for a lot of the customers who we as Zindagi speak to is that there is, in general, mass uncertainty as to what does the word zero trust actually mean. There was a customer, a very large customers, very large PSU organization, and that the person came and told me, the customer told me that he said that I thought I knew what zero trust is all about, but the more OEMs that I talk to, the more manufacturers that I talk to, everyone has got a different interpretation of zero trust, right? And now he says he's not sure whether he understands the concept at all in the first place or not. So the idea of this webinar is to basically try and demystify zero trust. What gives me the authority to demystify? Nothing. I mean, all that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to go back to first principles. I'm trying to go back to the to the architecture or the framework of zero trust as published by NIST, as published by Forrester and Gartner, and try and distill that information and simplify it for all of us for a more meaningful conversation and discussion in the industry in general, right? So that's what the agenda is, to try and demystify zero trust and see how we can move forward as every single CIO or CISO, how we can move forward with zero trust as a concept. That's the idea behind the webinar. About me, well, I'm the founder and CEO of Zindagi Technologies. Around 18 years in IT. I consider myself to be a developer, an architect, a cybersecurity consultant. My company, for the past 5 years, we've had the honor of working with large scale enterprises as well as a lot of small to medium sized businesses where we, consult with them to talk about their cybersecurity posture and help in setting up their cybersecurity practice. And a large amount of our customers are, have been, we played a pivotal role in setting up their security operations center and their network operations centers in the past. So I'm hoping that whatever experience I have had in the past few years, I can share it with you and share my perspective around that with all of you. So, getting the elephant out of the room, why do we call ourselves Zindagi? It's actually based out of, Richard Branson's quote. So somebody asked him that, how do you define a business? And his definition of a business was that a business is nothing else but an idea that'll make other people's lives better. So that's how we actually called ourselves Zindagi, shamelessly copied from that quote, that how we can help improve people's lives. Which brings me to our why, how, and what. I believe that the reason we exist is to use innovative technology solutions and services to improve the lives of our customers and to empower businesses. And also the way we do this is by empathizing with the customer's needs and challenges with a deep sense of empathy, and then coming up with bespoke solutions to address those needs. How do we do this? Well, we basically, kind of participate in the entire life cycle of the project. All right. Thank you, Shweta. You're saying that I'm too close to the screen. So how do we do this? We basically participate in the entire life cycle of the project, right from the pre-sale stage to the plan, design, implement, operate, manage, stage of the entire project. So we are an ISO 27001 certified organization. We have our own project management office to ensure that the projects, whatever projects we execute, have a fair degree of governance around them. And we more or less offer the full plate of managed services as well as professional services to our customers. All right, so zero trust. As is the case with anything in IT, zero trust is not just the technology. It is about the process and the mindset. So it is about people, process, and technology. Typically, if you ask any strategy leader like a CIO or a CISO, why are they looking at implementing zero trust? Typical response will be twofold. One is that they want to prevent data exfiltration. They want to prevent a data breach. And the second one is they want business to go on as normal, business to go on as usual. Now, of course, major corporations are the prime targets for attackers, because they're attempting to breach data, they're attempting to get as large of a payload of data as possible. And this could include, millions of users, personal information, financial information, login details, credit card details, bank details, etc. And these details are then sold to the underground markets. However, the attackers will target anyone and everyone from whom they can extract information, irrespective of who you are and what kind of a business you run. There will always be a market for your information, right? They'll always be willing to pay some amount for your personal data or your confidential data, and that is what the cyber criminals are after, right? So my point here is that the zero trust is not a product that you can implement. It's not just one technology that you can implement. It is a mindset shift, right? And let's talk about what this mindset shift is all about. A little background of zero trust. This is going to get philosophical for around 30 seconds. But it's interesting to understand that the concept of zero trust came about, I think, around 26 years ago, in 1994. A PhD candidate by the name of Dr. Stephen Marsh. I hope I'm remembering his name correctly, but he came up with this concept. He said that for humans, trust can be represented in two ways. One is confrontational, and the other one is a pure human phenomenon. So what does confrontational mean? Imagine that your car has stopped working on the highway. Suddenly, a car repair van comes in front of you. A person all dressed up as a mechanic, gets out of that car and says, "I will help you." And a little while ago, you saw that mechanic at a petrol pump 2-3 kilometers away. You will most likely trust him to fix your car, to repair your car, as opposed to any random stranger wearing a jeans and a t-shirt, right? So that's an example of confrontational trust. The second example is general trust as a human phenomenon, like based on our morality, ethics, law, justice, judgment, etc. We form trust relationships like that. So this PhD candidate in the year 1994, the month of April 1994, he said that we should convert trust into a mathematical construct. And we should apply that mathematical construct to systems, applications, and networks. 26 years ago is when he made this observation. Then in the year 2010, right, I think 14 years later, an industry analyst by the name of John Kinderwag, he said that trust people. If you want to trust, you can trust people, but you can't trust their packets. right? The packets and the frames which are coming out of your laptop, you can't trust them because you don't know whether that person's been hacked, whether there is a malware inside, that machine, has it been infected, etc., etc. So if you want to trust people, but don't trust packets, right? So that's how the concept came in, right? 1994 and then 2010. That's how old this concept is. The biggest fundamental shift that happened in zero trust was in the year 2009 when Google's internal IT department, they decided to implement zero trust across their entire data center fabric and across their entire employee ecosystem. It's a very beautiful case study if you want to read about it. It's called Google's Beyond Corp. The second bullet point that you see on the slide deck, Google's Beyond Corp. So it's a very interesting case study as to how they achieved zero trust for entire Google without bringing everything down. They were able to achieve it, right? It took them 7 years to do it. So that's an interesting case study. And what we'll do now is we will also spend some time in the slide deck. We will talk about the frameworks for zero trust, which learned from Beyond Corp, which learned from all this theory and implemented it. So we'll talk about these three frameworks: the NIST framework, the Forrester framework, and the Gartner framework. In networking, we have this concept of an OSI model. I feel that NIST model is more like an OSI model. It's a little bit theoretical in nature, and that Forrester model is more of a TCP/IP kind of a structure. It's more practical. So we'll talk about all these three in detail as we move forward. All right. Now, before we talk about zero trust, let's look at where we are currently. What is the kind of security paradigm that organizations typically implement today? That concept is referred to as Peter defense. It's like a castle and a moat architecture, which basically means that anything inside my office, inside my premises, inside my campus, inside my building is by default trusted, and anything outside is untrusted. If something that is outside should become trusted, he can establish a VPN tunnel into my office, and then again he becomes trusted, right? Now, so basically, take an example that if you have a work laptop or a desktop and it's connected on the same floor as your printer, they can both talk to each other. There aren't a lot of privileges around them to be able to talk to each other. For example, if there is a team, right? If you've got a team working on a common project, they all have access to the same file server. They can share files, they can delete files, they can modify files, right? And any sort of perimeter defense that we deploy at the vanguard, be it a firewall or an anti-malware, is basically implemented in such a way that it is supposed to protect anything outside to come in and anything inside to go out. Now, this security concept is a little silly if you think about it. It basically says outside bad, inside good. And the reason it's not going to work now is because of the rise of mobile devices, the rise of BYOD, your own device, because of cloud applications, SaaS applications, because of this concept of hybrid cloud, or the concept of multi-cloud, or the very fact that every organization is moving towards the concept of remote workforce, right? You can be at home, you can be in office, and you should have access to all the data that you require so that your productivity should not get impacted, right? So there is no boundary anymore. Organizations cannot control every device of the employee anymore. And even if they could control the device, let's assume that they can control the device is not just a device. The device is now a tunnel, and that tunnel is basically from internal to anywhere, including public cloud apps, software as a service, platform as a service, right? So the device is not a device which can be controlled anymore, is the paradigm. So that's what the old model is. The old model is basically that of a chewy center, right? You basically break the crust, and then you have a very chewy center which has inherently got a lot of trust associated with it. Now, this is the new concept. The last time when I had presented my webinar, I got feedback from my team saying that you are too technical, you go into too much of depth, and you end up becoming like a geek. So I've tried to. I was given feedback that I should share more examples and try and kind of simplify things. So here is an example of my trying to explain zero trust in the form of an airport paradigm, right? So as I said, zero trust is basically a security mindset right? Which is centered on the idea that organizations should not automatically trust an inside or outside their parameters. And alternatively, they must verify anything and everything that is trying to connect before giving it access. That's what fundamentally zero trust is, right? Don't verify, always verify, never trust, right? Now, how do you basically allow a person to come in? You enable something like a MFA, a multi-factor authentication. Somebody who wants access, he has to prove that he deserves that access. You will have to, kind of, it'll not be as simple as a username and password. There'll be some mechanism like a biometric, a fingerprint scan, a retina scan, a one-time password, a mobile authenticator app of some sort, right? There's another level of authentication that's required. And even after that person is able to enter the network, that is that you give him access, even after giving him access, you have to make sure that the access that that person gets is only for a need to know basis and need to access basis. That access should be conditional. It should be temporal. It should be only available for a very short duration of time for which it is required, and then the access should disappear, right? For example, if I'm an HR guy, I should not access to the source code repository of my company, right? So that's another example of zero trust. Now let's try and apply it to this airport analogy, right? Let's imagine that you're taking an outbound flight. It's an international flight, and when you arrive at the airport, as far as the system is concerned, you are unauthenticated, you are unauthorized, you are untrusted, right? So you can't access anything. The CISF Jawan will take your ticket and your ID card, and then he'll say, okay, I've performed an initial identification. Now you can come in. Then you'll have access to the public area, right? Then you go to the check-in counter. You try to check in your bag. Since you cannot have a power bank inside your bag when you try and check in, right? Like same concept if you apply to a laptop, just like the airline will not allow you to take your bag, to check in your bag if it's got a power bank. Similarly, an organization can implement a concept that until you have an antivirus, anti-malware, or an encrypted hard disk on your laptop, I will not even allow you to join my laptop. I'll not even allow you to join my network, right? So then you've gone through second line of defense, right? You've bought the ticket, you've done a check-in. Now, the third thing that you'll do is now you're inside that area, you're inside that boarding lounge, right? You're waiting for your flight. Even there, you don't have complete access, right? If you cannot enter the VIP lounge, you cannot enter the staff area, you can't enter the airport hangar. There are places where you can't enter. And even if you try to enter the VIP lounge, there'll be a re-authentication that will be required for you, right? So as you can see, there are boundaries within the boundaries. There is a segmentation within a segmentation. This concept is referred to as micro-segmentation. And this is the perfect real-world example of zero trust that we've seen implemented anywhere around us, right? The moment you try to check in, the moment you try to enter the flight on that umbilical cord, or what's it called, the aero bridge, the moment you try to do that, there is once again going to be a scenario wherein they'll check your boarding pass to see whether your privileges allow you to enter the airplane or not, right? All right. Let's see. Now, here is so this is nothing against Steve Ballmer or Microsoft per se, but I think Microsoft's got a very, it's got a mature zero trust architecture. The point I'm trying to make is there is a lot of obfuscation, a lot of confusion in the minds of customers, because whenever OEMs speak to customers, they try to take whatever product that they have currently, they package it around zero trust, and then they try and sell it to customers, right? Whereas I believe, or at least we at Zindagi believe, that zero trust is not just a concept. It's not just a product or an action that you can take. It's more of a concept, right? So enterprises already are implementing a lot of the products are required to implement zero trust. For example, many organizations already have multi-factor authentication in place. Many organizations are already using identity and access management. They are already using network access control in a lot of places, right? They're frequently implementing micro-segmentation within their data center. These are all elements that form the part of a larger zero trust strategy. Now, developing zero trust in your environment isn't merely about implementing individual technologies. Instead, it is about using these and other technologies to enforce the idea that no one and nothing can access your data until they've proven to the system that they are the right person, they are who they are, right? So you should not allow them to access anything. Right. So, and one more thing that I'd want to point out is it's not just a one-time job. You can't press a MCB or a switch of zero trust and say that now we are zero trust certified. It is an ongoing process. It is an ongoing and difficult process. The reason I'm saying difficult is that if you want to even implement single sign-on and multi-factor authentication for your systems, there are a lot of legacy systems which don't even support multi-factor authentication, right? So there's there is a play here. It's an ongoing journey that I want to talk about as to how an organization can adopt the zero trust architecture. Shweta's telling me the question on the forum. So yeah, Kuljit's asking a question that is it the same as just-in-time access? So Kuljit, yes. So there are two concepts, right? One is just-in-time access, and the second one is just enough access, right? So you want to give access just in time, and you want to give only access to the resources that the user requires and nothing else, be it a container, be it infrastructure, be it the network, be it the application, be it the database. Only the access that is required as per policy, only that should be given, right? So least privilege access to just in time. I hope that that answers your question. All right. Let's see. What are the attributes of the zero trust mindset? Right. If you're implementing a zero trust network, what attributes should you keep in mind in this mindset that we're talking about? Right. Number one, it is highly granular, which means minimal possible access, which is least privilege to the smallest resource unit. Right. Second is it's dynamic in nature. Right. How many of you have seen that concept wherein you try to log into Google to Gmail, and then it says that you are normally you would have been able to sign in, but Gmail suddenly detects that there's something wrong, there's something different that is happening here. I think I need to prompt this user on his phone that verify that you see these digits on your phone or not. So what happened there was that Google found something different in the behavior when you're trying to log in today versus when you tried to log in yesterday, right? So zero trust is dynamic in nature. You have to ensure that trust is constantly reassessed throughout the transaction between user and the resources that they're requesting, right? Number three is that zero trust is end to end. Security stretches from the requesting object to the object being requested. It has to be end to end, right? And fourth concept of this mindset is that the traditional concept of the Chewy center, the concept of there being a perimeter are gone. There's no such concept of inside good and outside bad, right? These are the four attributes that we have to keep in mind. Now, with what I've just said, right, I hope it set the base for, or it set the fundamentals for what we are about to talk next, right? What we're about to talk next is the three frameworks. Like I said in the beginning of this webinar, that our attempt is to try and demystify what is zero trust. And the way we will try to demystify it is by going back to first principles as opposed to inventing something. The intention being that everybody gets onto the same page so that once we have a conversation with our customers and prospects and CIOs and CISOs, we're all talking the same language. And the first principles that I'm referring to are three frameworks. One is the NIST, National Institute of Science and Technology's special publication 800-207. This one. Second is the Forrester ZTX framework. And the third one is the Gartner QATAR framework. So we'll talk about these three frameworks. I would encourage all of you on the call, so if you can spend time in reading about these frameworks, I think they go into a lot more depth than what I would be able to cover in this slide deck. But I'm hoping that I can give enough primer to all of us so that we're all talking the same language, right? Now, what is the first framework? The first framework is the special publication of the National Institute of Science and Technology, 800-207. This basically says that you assume you've been hacked, right? You assume that your network is hostile, you assume that you've been breached, and there is nothing secure, right? That's the concept of not doing trust but verify, but never trust and always verify, right? That's the theoretical concept behind the NIST framework. Now, there are 7 tenets of this framework, right? So let's talk about these tenets briefly. I'll just have a glass of water and see if there are any questions in the chat room in the meantime. Okay, no questions. All right, so yeah, so NIST frameworks and what are the 7 tenets, right? So the idea behind this was that, when this NIST framework was launched, mainly the initiative provides federal agencies with detailed recommendations on maintaining and protecting the agency and the civilians' private data, right? So it's a US organization, the National Institute of Science and Technology, right? And what they did was they came up with these 7 principles. The first 3 principles are basically for granting access. Who are you? What can you do? And what you've done. The typical AAA, stuff that we've been reading as network engineers, right? Authentication, authorization, and accounting, right? This is fairly common, the first one. The second one is, of course, integrity. The integrity basically means that the enterprise is going to monitor and measure the integrity and the security posture of all the devices that are owned, all the devices which are accessing the data, right? So this is, fairly obvious. What is not obvious is the last one, which is the number 3, which is observable state. Now, observable state is similar to integrity. The difference is that it deals with the characteristics and the behavioral attributes that an organization wants to evaluate, right? The contextual information. You will be allowed to access a certain set of resources only if you are meeting the behavioral attributes which I have defined in my policy. For example, where you are logging from, what time are you logging from, what physical medium are you using to log in, what type of device are you accessing, what minimum deviations will I allow for you to come in? Are there any changes in behavioral patterns? Has your behavior changed as a user? All these things will be kept in mind before I even allow you to access my data, right? So first 3, the ones which are colored in yellow, are basically means for granting access to you, right? That's the yellow highlight. The second 2 that you see there, which is minimal access in the form of time and minimal access in the form of size. That is basically trying to say that how much time, how much access should I give you, and for how long should I give you access for the resources that you're trying to access? What are the examples of these resources? Your Kubernetes clusters, your processes, any IoT actuators. Like in IoT, there is a concept called sensor and actuator. So sensor is basically that detects something, and an actuator is something that does something, right? For example, a pneumatic actuator, something that works on wind, something that works on mechanics, something that works on electrical relays, right? Even those actuators have to be controlled, and whether I should give you access to those or not is something that will fall under the gamut of minimum access required for which all resources I have to give access to, right? So that's what the second highlight indicates, which is your minimal access and for how long should I give it to you. The next one is focused around monitoring all access and encrypting all access. Now, the enterprise is going to collect as much information as possible about the assets, about the network infrastructure, and the communication using streaming telemetry data. Right? And at the same time, any communication that is happening from anywhere is completely encrypted. Right? So, like the first three were talking about the minimal essentials for granting access. The tenant number 4 and tenant number 5 are talking about the minimum or least privilege that should be given to you. And tenant number 6 and 7 are talking about continuously monitoring and securing assets. They're collecting data about the overall security posture and dynamically changing the posture the moment they see something wrong that's happening, right? And this is applicable all across. It's applicable to your data, your networks, your users, analytics, automation, and appliances, right? So that's what the NIST architecture is all about. Now, as I said, the NIST architecture looks more like the OSI model to me versus versus the Forrester model, which is more of TCP/IP. Because in the Forrester ZTX, the ZTX is the zero trust extended framework. They have documented not just the why and the what, but they've even done a very good job of documenting the how. How should you implement it, right? They've kind of done their due diligence of people asking questions to Forrester that I've understood zero trust, but can you tell what all parameters do I have to keep in mind for integrating my IAM, my identity and access management solution, with my SIEM and my SOAR platform, right? What all integration points and touch points are required, right? So they go into that level of depth, which is why normally whenever I start a conversation with our customers on zero trust, this is the first thing that we talk about. There are a lot of times when we talk to customers and we realize that for them, zero trust means SASE, right? It means secure edge, right? For some customers, zero trust means CASB, right? You implement a cloud, broker or a secure web gateway. And for some customers, it means zero trust network access. Yeah, mera VPN hata do. As long as you're able to get rid of my VPN client and enable some sort of layer 7 security, I think that's zero trust. But the beautiful things about this framework, about Forrester's framework, is it actually breaks it down. Now, how does it break down? Let's talk about that for a minute. What Forrester does is it basically says that there are six pillars. 6 pillars of technologies and solutions that you have to look at. Number 1 is the network, which basically means what does Mr. OEM, right? Mr. OEM, what does the technology do to enable the principles of network isolation, macro segmentation, micro segmentation? What is the technology that you're providing? VXLAN, NVGRE, etc. How are you achieving this? Second question that they ask is, from a data perspective, how does the technology enable the classification and categorization of data into schemas? How do you ensure encryption? How do you ensure that data at rest is encrypted and data at motion is encrypted? And what kind of controls do you put in place as per in your architecture or in your products? The third question that it asks is humans, right? For example, I'm sure a lot of you would have heard this paradigm. Like there is a concept called CIA, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? The 3 principles of security. Typically, in the IT side of the world, the information technology side of the world, people say that confidentiality is important, and integrity is very important, and of course, availability is of course important. But that's typically the prioritized list. In OT, which is your operational technology, SCADA, your PLC, HMI, that side of the world, right? There is OT technology. The number 1 priority for an OT CIO is human life, because if somebody were to penetrate or hack into an OT platform, they can potentially bring down a gas pipeline, they can bring down a water pipeline, they can potentially cause a nuclear reactor to cause problems, etc., right? So that is why number 3 that you see in front of you is workforce. How does the solution work to secure the humans around the network and the business infrastructure, thereby reducing the threat to humans, right? Number 4 is workforce, right? Number 4 is workload. Your workloads can be anything now, right? They can be a Lambda function. they could be a container, they could be a virtual machine, they could be bare metal, they could reside anywhere, they could move from anywhere to anywhere else, right? How do you ensure that, irrespective of how the organization is deploying their workloads, your solution and your technology will protect them, right? So that is what workloads is. Number 5 is automation and orchestration. This means that, does the technology or solution that you're providing, Mr. OEM, does it provide helpful analytics and data points that enable dark corners of systems and infrastructure, so that you get end-to-end visibility as to what is happening, so you can take more informed decisions, right? So now this is basically 6 tenets of Forrester's ZTX. And when they kind of confuse everybody with these 6 tenets, and then somebody would be asking them that, I've understood that, but how do I get started, right? What is my first step that we should take? So what they do is they come up with a 5-step model. Forrester comes up with a 5-step model. First thing that they say is that you identify what your sensitive data is. For those of us who are network engineers, right? They say that if you put everything in a priority queue, then there is no priority, right? You can't define priority if you put everything in a priority queue, right? So if everything is critical, then nothing is critical, right? So first of all, you identify what is your crown jewel, right?
Sir,
Identify what is, yeah.
the slide needs to be changed. I think the screen is stuck on Forrester ZTX. Yeah, now it's visible.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you, Shweta. So these were the 6 tenets that we were talking about. I'm sorry I didn't change the slide, but I was talking about network, data, workforce, workload, automation and orchestration, and visibility and analytics, right? So, and then I was talking about what are the steps that Forrester recommends that you take. The first step is you identify what your sensitive data is, right? Identify, this is my crown jewel, this is what I want to protect. The second step is going to be that you understand what all transactions are acceptable to you, what all workflows are acceptable to you, right? You create an application dependency map, and you understand that this user should be allowed to access this data, and from an egress perspective as well as from an ingress perspective, right? So that's number 2. Number 1 was you identify your sensitive data. Number 2 is that you identify what are the acceptable routes of transactions. Number 3, you define your micro perimeter. You're no longer dependent upon the castle and moat concept. You define micro segmentation throughout your entire network. Number 4 is that you start monitoring your entire zero trust environment with security analytics. And number 5 is that you start embracing security automation and adaptive response, so that the mean time to respond to a security threat is drastically reduced, right? So these are the 5 steps by which Forrester recommends that you can implement zero trust in your network, and this is thoroughly documented, right? It's all content is available on Forrester's website. They've come up with two articles, right? One is called Forrester Wave, and the second one is called Forrester New Wave. Forrester Wave came out in 2020, and Forrester New Wave came out in 2021. So my suggestion is read both. That will give you a perspective on what Forrester's thought process is, right? Finally, we come to the third and the final framework, which is Gartner's QATAR, right? QATAR stands for Continuous Adaptive Risk and Threat and Trust Assessment. Continuous Adaptive Risk and Trust Assessment. Now, this is a framework of zero trust by Gartner, and Gartner does not even use the word zero in this framework, right? So it's not typically what you will find when you do a search for zero trust, but I think it's important to mention because of that first word that they're using, right? They're using the word continuous, continuous and adaptive. That is what is important. Now, the reason it's the reality is that zero trust in itself is necessary, but it's only a start of the journey, right? QATAR indicates the reality of securing a world where digital businesses capabilities can be accessed anywhere by anyone from any device, and where attackers continue to grow and keep on innovating and keep up coming up with new forms of threats, right? So what QATAR has done is, in this QATAR framework, They they talk about stuff that we've talked about in the previous frameworks. At a high level, they're saying that 100% device visibility and automated control is the bedrock. Number two is continuous monitoring and assessment and remediation of cyber and operational risk. Number three is micro-segmentation to contain breaches and limit any sort of lateral movement and damage. Number four is going for a multi-vendor solution, right? Don't give the cat the milk to guard, right? So basically, just don't go in for just one solution. Have let your firewall be with a different vendor, let your router and switches be from a different vendor, let your IAM be from a different vendor. That's the recommendation they're making. Next one is that new level multi-vendor orchestration and process and automation response. For example, developing playbooks in your SOAR platform, right? Enhancing that and enhancing the integration between the SOAR, the IAM, the next generation firewall, the multi-factor authentication tools, the VDI architecture, etc. Right? And next one is discovery, posture assessment, and remediation and control of all physical and virtual devices, irrespective of where they exist, whether they are on premises or on the cloud, right? And finally, number seven is effective security management of IoT devices and OT devices, right? Because typically an IoT device typically does not have an agent installed on it, right? So how do you secure something that doesn't have an agent, right? How do you talk to it? How do you communicate to it? What perimeter events do you implement to protect the device, both from an uptime perspective as well as from if that device gets compromised, there should not be any egress communication out of that device to impact the rest of the network, right? So these are the seven principles of QATAR. I think there is another question on the chat. Zero trust is all about So there's a question from Kushal which says that zero trust is all about multi-factor authentication and limited access of resources, just like ICE, Posture, and DACL. Is it right? So Kushal, as I don't know if I was able to answer this question in the previous slides or not, but I believe that zero trust, multi-factor authentication is one component of this entire infrastructure. Layer 7 security is another facet of this infrastructure. Enabling SASE, which I earlier discarded as something that's not relevant. I think SASE is also a very important part of this architecture because it ensures that your VPN servers and your VPN concentrators are not bombarded, but all layer 7 communication is trusted, and at the same time any sort of video communication can keep going out from a separate means of communication. IAM, identity and access management, I believe, is another fundamental principle of this architecture. So you're right, multi-factor authentication is a very strong component of zero trust, but it's not the only component. So how do you become a zero trust enterprise? What is a zero trust enterprise? How do you define a zero trust enterprise? I believe that any organization which has been able to implement zero trust concepts in both their physical as well as virtual constructs, and has also implemented continual processes and procedures to ensure that they provide just-in-time access and least privilege access to anyone who's attempting to access their workloads, that organization is a zero trust enterprise. How do you become a zero trust enterprise? You become a zero trust enterprise when you implement zero trust architecture. And how do you implement a zero trust architecture? You implement a zero trust architecture by forming or formulating a strategy around zero trust concepts and embracing the relationship between multiple components, and then having a very fine-tuned kind of workflow planning, that what device should be allowed to talk to which device, what human should be allowed to talk to which workload should be allowed to which other workload, right? We have to go into that very fine, detailing, and this detailing is continuous. It's not just a one-time activity, right? Which kind of brings me to a shameless plug. So Zindagi Technologies offers, zero trust design services for our customers. As I said earlier, that if everything is critical, then nothing is critical. So what we do is we basically bunch of cybersecurity engineers who have a fair degree of governance around whatever we try to implement. What is our service? What is it that we offer? Well, the first thing that we do when we kind of get engaged with you is to implement zero trust in your network on select high value assets. Right? We'll identify your high value assets. We will perform an asset discovery, and we'll also do flow mapping for you to understand, what all access should be given to these high value assets. Right now, using this information, our expert consultants will create a targeted zero trust architecture for you. We will do a gap analysis for you, that what all technologies you already have in place and what all technologies you need to implement, and then we'll create an entire implementation plan and roadmap for you to protect those high value assets. This is something that we've seen a lot of success in. We try to come across as very vendor agnostic. We kind of present the entire report to you as to where you should, where you are and where you should be, and then we continually participate with you in this entire journey. So if you would be interested in finding out more about the services that we offer for zero trust, our email address is info@zindagitech.com. And Shweta, if you can also mention our telephone number on the chat, so that if anybody's interested, they can reach out there as well. So info@zindagitech.com is where you can get, if you can drop your request, if you can drop in your interest there, we'll get back to you and we can tell you more about how we do this and what is the approach that we take. With that, I come to the end of my slide deck. I want to see if there are any questions that I can answer for anybody. Maybe if you can type in your questions, or you could maybe raise your hand in the chat and we can unmute you and we have a conversation around that. Thank you, Shweta, for sharing the telephone number. Anyone, any questions, you can type it in. So Samir sir is asking a question that what kind of cyber attacks do you foresee in the zero trust domain? So Samir sir, thank you for your question. I believe that implementing zero trust is of course the right strategy forward. It's when we look around us and we find that when I observe that state actors who are aware of vulnerabilities in our IT and OT domain, they're aware of it and then they don't publish it. I don't know, but I'm just talking theoretically here. But people who are aware of the vulnerabilities and they're not publishing it, right? And eventually, after years of implementing something like Log4j and JDNI, we come to know that there is such a huge zero-day vulnerability around a logging framework. I realize that security can never be a zero-sum game, right? I feel that in a scenario wherein an organization has implemented zero trust properly and has adopted the mindset and the framework when it comes to zero trust, I believe that the attack vectors will be drastically reduced. So today, when we read about all these reports of the attacks that are happening right now, a majority of these attacks are BEC, business email compromise. They are ransomware and they are spear phishing. I believe that these attacks the trajectory of these attacks will greatly go down. Right? They'll greatly go down. I believe that they say that the more difficult you make it for a hacker, the more secure you make your network. So I think, of course, we will see a fair degree of protection for our customers and their enterprises to kind of circumvent a large amount of these attacks. But I think at the same time, ransomware is also getting more refined, right? There are new variants of ransomware coming out, and with insider threats increasing, there could be a new vulnerability that comes out in the form of a 0-day. But I believe these methods will help in mitigating a lot of these vulnerabilities. My pleasure. Kushal's typing a message. In the meantime, if could we, is there a possibility that we could unmute and see if there are any other questions, Shweta? I don't know. Is that a possibility? Can we unmute everybody and see if there is a question?
Yes, we can unmute.
Let's see. I don't see that option of unmuting everybody. Where do I find that?
I think we have to unmute one by one.
No, they don't have unmute privileges. No, nobody's got unmute privileges. That's the button is grayed out. If anybody's got any message, questions, they could just drop in a message and we could unmute you.
I've unmuted for everyone. There is a question.
All right, so we've unmuted everybody. In case any questions, please go ahead. Samir, so you're saying that does it mean that people that get in despite zero trust can be really dangerous? I would want to believe so, sir. I think if you've implemented, if we were able to implement a zero trust strategy correctly, right, and if we were able to put in controls in place across public cloud and private cloud and on premises, and we were able to kind of put this entire solution methodically in place, and if somebody is able to penetrate despite that, I believe that is definitely a security threat, and that those people can definitely be dangerous. All right, I guess nobody else has any questions. Kuljit says that zero trust doesn't mean zero risk. They say trust in God, but lock your car. So well said, Kuljit. Yeah, great. Excellent, everybody. I want to thank everybody for your time. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank you for making the session interactive. I really enjoyed it. And if you have any suggestions or feedbacks on any other topics that you'd like us to present, we more or less, have multiple technology practices with cybersecurity being high on our priority list. But if there's anything else that you'd like for us to talk about in our next webinar, we'll be happy to take your feedback. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.